Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. Big updates for Ferrari going into their home race in Monza for the Italian Grand Prix. A brand new rear wing they've cooked up for this weekend. No surprises there, but it's only just received FIA homologation, it seems, just in the nick of time to potentially give them a big advantage this weekend. Is it going to make a big difference for Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, especially after Hamilton's controversial penalty that he picked up before the race even started back in the Dutch Grand Prix? Some more updates there as well, including plenty else to get into. Very much into your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. Let's get into things. This is pretty funny. 2029, 2030, when are the next iteration of engine regulations going to come in? I do find it kind of remarkable that most people are of the opinion that the upcoming regulations in 2026 on the engine side are so misguided that we're already talking about what is following them. And according to AMUS, a very reputable source, the following power unit regulations will be naturally aspirated 2.4 litre V8 hybrids. That's what we're looking at. We don't yet know when. There was even some talk from some of the teams that they might want to do it for 2026 and just scrap these new engines entirely. That was never going to happen, but if the rumours are true from Pirelli that some of the data they're getting from the simulations of the teams differs in lap time by 4 seconds a lap, maybe some of these teams have cooked up rather a good engine and others most certainly have not. The reality is these upcoming engine regulations will not be lasting as long as the turbo hybrid era did with the V6s that we currently have, and it will be moving back to something else. This has been what we've been wanting in Formula 1, I think, for some time. We've talked about it many an occasion on the channel. Naturally aspirated or turbocharged, I don't really mind, but a V8 engine with a hybrid component, sure. The manufacturers are always going to want, certainly currently, some sort of electrical element in there, but the idea of going to an internal combustion engine run on fully or mostly sustainable fuels has been a big talking point for some time. Mohammed Ben Sulayem, to his credit, has been pushing hard for this, and it seems that even though 2026 hasn't even happened, we're already talking about a V8 engine of a just 2.4 litre displacement as was used from 2006 to 2013. We would still be using a hybrid component, which would still be pretty substantial because the current one is 120 kilowatts, the upcoming one is 350 kilowatts. We'd be talking about something in between, so instead of 50% electrical as it's going to be next year, or instead of 15% electrical as it was before, it is currently, it would be more like 30% electrical compared to the V8. But look, I think that's better than what maybe we have now in some regards, just because the V8 sound better, and then it's probably going to prove to be better than what is upcoming, but time will only tell on that. George, understandably, is very confident about what Mercedes are doing. I'm definitely confident on the power unit side. I think on average over these last 10 years, I can't remember when Mercedes didn't have the best power unit, apart from 2019, but obviously there were some other reasons for that, he says. So, you know, throwing a little shade the way of Ferrari and the rocket ship they had for a time that season. But even before the regulation change, even in the V8 era, I think the Mercedes engine was probably the most competitive one of the field as well. So definitely I'm very confident in the organisation in Brixworth. Is he going to get the 2-year deal he wants? Maybe, maybe not, with Max on the horizon. Now, we will talk again just about this bit of drama. So, Hamilton has a 5-place grid penalty for the Italian Grand Prix. Bit of a nightmare, especially given what we're going to discuss with the Ferrari potentially in a better spot for the upcoming race. But overtaking around Monza is challenging because the downforce is so low that DRS doesn't really do all that much. Now, this is pretty interesting. This guy, Thomas, looks up all of the telemetry during the reconnaissance lap before things got underway. Now, Hamilton was penalised for failing to slow under this double-waved yellow flag. He comes around the banking, there's people on the pit straight, obviously, and because of the final corner being, you know, I wouldn't say blinds, but there's not a massive run between when you come out of the final corner and where the grid begins, so, and especially where the pit lane entry is, the steward said, okay, the race directors, we're going to throw a double-waved yellow here to make sure that the drivers are being careful. Now, Hamilton did ease off, but he didn't ease off enough according to the steward. If you just focus on the left-hand side here for a second, Hamilton comes around the corner, he sees the yellow flag around about now, where he is here, and you can see that his throttle trace reduces, right? Like he goes from being pretty much full throttle to he reduces the throttle by, you know, I mean, they said it was like 10% or so, and then at this point he then obviously slams on the brakes and comes into the pit lane and all this, and then puts the throttle back on a little bit, and then he's into the pit lane. So, you know, you guys can see that reduction there in the throttle tracer from Hamilton, but they did not deem that, and fair enough, I think, they did not deem that to be enough to constitute slowing substantially or significantly or whatever, the way the regulations define it. The question was, okay, yeah, Hamilton probably deserved a penalty for this. The question was whether it was, you know, should they've just given it to him anyway? Yes, he crashed out of the race, but should they have just added it to his race time or something? But that's not how it ended up being. He's going to get it carried forward to the next race. The question is this fair for Hamilton, given that Yuki seemingly did the same thing but worse? So the argument is that you see Tsunoda here on the map is at the same point as Hamilton, so presumably he sees the yellow flag here as well. Now look, maybe this yellow flag, the double waved yellow, wasn't here for Yuki as it was for Hamilton. Maybe he was only seeing a couple of, you know, waved yellow flags by a marshal or something at the side of the track. That's a good question. We don't know 100%. I have not seen the onboards. But assuming that this was on, Yuki passes that same point, going faster than Lewis, and continues to keep it absolutely to the floor. Like you can see, Yuki's not moved that throttle tracer 1 inch until at this point he then lifts off, but he's literally entering the pit lane at this point, right? So then he slams the brakes on, goes to the pits. So some were saying, oh, he saw the yellow flag here, so he, you know, so he came off the throttle, but like he's basically already at pit entry there. So look, there is a case to be made if Ferrari wanted to go and look at this data and say, well, maybe Yuki deserved a penalty for that. Look, without the onboarding comparison, it's kind of impossible to say fully, but it is understandable to say, wow, why do they investigate Hamilton's and not Tsunoda's, given that based on this, you would at least consider having a look, would you not? Now, if Yuki was... Look, Ferrari could try and push for this, but what do they gain, right? They've got to pay money to the stewards to look into it. The FIA charge the teams nowadays for doing so. And then they might say, oh yeah, you were right. So what do you gain? Yuki loses a couple of points in the championship because he would be penalised, presumably in hindsight, for the Dutch Grand Prix. His penalty in Hamilton's case wouldn't get carried over because Yuki finished the race. Yuki would be demoted out of the points. And then what, right? What a Ferrari gain? Well, nothing, because they both DNF'd. So Ferrari aren't going to push for this. Look, if I'm another team, let's say, I mean, who finished 11th in the end? If I'm Franco Colapinto, then I'm saying, hang on, Briatore, can you maybe have a word about this? Because we might be able to get Yuki a penalty for this. So I don't know if that's going to go anywhere, but intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Another bit of drama was around this incident when Antonelli took out Leclerc, and Leclerc, of course, as a result of that, didn't finish the race, and there was no more points to gain from what we just discussed. Now, Antonelli has been a very, you know, I don't want to say controversial precisely, but people's opinion on Kimi is rather mixed at the moment. Certainly Jacques Villeneuve, who is full of great quotes, was all over it this weekend, made a few remarks about Kimi, and one of them was this: very poor, a move that you might see from an F3 driver who doesn't have experience. Formula 1 is too much for him, he says. Basically, not ready, should have been given more time. Now look, was Kimi given quite a lot of time in terms of preparation? He did lots of testing mileage for Mercedes coming into this year. Was he as well prepared as he could have been? No, but if you wait until you're fully prepared before you come in, then maybe, you know, you could have come in earlier and learned a bit more on the job, as it were. Kind of like how Max Verstappen did in the early days, where he was a bit of a liability at times, but also clearly still very fast. So this is the debate around Kimi, right? Because you're looking at what Ollie Behrman has done. I think Behrman's been very impressive this year. He finally got back in the points with a phenomenal P6 this weekend, starting from the pit lane. Bortoletto, in terms of qualifying, has been doing an exceptional job, I would say, against Nico Hülkenberg. Yeah, Colapinto, Doohan, and Lawson to some degree have had difficult times, but obviously Hadjar is the other key name, right? He just got on the podium this past weekend. So for Antonelli, things are very interesting because he's now tied up with Alex Albon in the championship. Of course, in Canada, Alex, well, and the whole Williams team had a disastrous few races, but they're now back in the mix, and Kimi I mean, it's kind of crazy, right? Since we turned up to the European stint, kind of since Miami, really, Imola, Monaco, Spa, some of those weren't his faults. For example, Imola, his engine failed. Monaco was his fault, but also George had a terrible time as well. So, like, there are some caveats, right? But if you look at these rounds in the European stint, obviously apart from Canada, like, he's barely scored points and it's not been great, and he's now tied up directly with Alexander Albon in the championship. And like, Albon's having a great season, but the fact that he's tied up with Kimi, you know, in a Mercedes shouldn't really be possible, you would think. And look, Antonelli, I was expecting more of what we saw in Miami, right? Like, that sprint pole that he got there was remarkable, especially on a track that he wasn't familiar with at all. And I think in some respects that almost kind of helped him, because he just, you know, he didn't have any preconceptions of like, okay, well, I just need to do this and get up to speed over the weekend and make sure I don't crash. He just kind of sent it, and you could see the talent that he had on display. I still think that's undeniable. And yeah, he's made more mistakes against Max in Austria, and then of course here against Leclerc. I actually think the move that he went for was incredibly ambitious, but I still respect the fact that he went for it on some level. I think a lot of drivers wouldn't have done, partly because they're more experienced and they know that that move probably wasn't worth it, but also because maybe they've not got that like youthful exuberance, as it were, that Antonelli clearly has. And I also liked what Antonelli said after the race. He apologized, but he didn't say like, oh, I'd never do that again, I'm so sorry. He was like, well, next time I'd probably think about it a bit more, but it's difficult to think about it in the moment. So I'm like, I do like Antonelli's approach and attitude, but I do think that his season has been underwhelming, of course, compared to expectations. I think especially because of what Hadjar's done, and even what Behrman's doing to some degree, and the other names that I mentioned earlier. Antonelli was expected and had pressure on him to potentially be the best or the most promising rookie for sure. That's been far from the case, and I think that's twofold. It's on the other rookies being really strong, and it's also on Antonelli not being as good as I think we expected. Will he get there? Personally, I think so. Half a season into his F1 career is far too early to give up on clearly the talent that Antonelli has, but it's not like his pace has been spectacular either. It's not like he either crashes or is on the podium, right? Like, it is clear that his pace has been a bit off George, but also George is great. And this weekend's Antonelli, and even in the last couple of weekends, has again started to be a little bit closer. So I think that Antonelli will still have a couple of real standout weekends before the season is done, but intrigued your thoughts on that in the comments. And also Isaac Hadjar, I just wanted to put the question out there, because in F3 he fought for the title. Last year he could have won F2, and like, I was impressed by him in F2. I thought he was solid, but I certainly didn't expect him to be as good as he has proved to be in Formula 1 so far. I mean, he's top 10 of the World Championship, slams in a podium last weekend. The question, I guess, is how far can Hadjar go? Could he be a future world champion? You know, we talked about Antonelli being a future world champion. Candidate possibility. I still think that's very plausible that Antonelli does win it at some point, but if you think that Antonelli might, or Behrman might, or whatever, then surely you'd have got to consider at least throwing Hadjar into the conversation too. There are questions about whether he should go to Red Bull or not, because let's be real, they're probably going to want to promote him, aren't they? And especially after this past weekend. Rosberg said a while ago, Isaac, don't do it, right? Like, it's a poison chalice. Don't take the Red Bull drive. Decline as hard as you possibly can. Look, next year the car might be more compliant, a bit of a reset in the regs. It's possible that he could be closer. You know, Red Bull, if they were to put Hadjar in the car instead of Yuki, they say that they want to give Tsunoda a bit more time, and Hadjar also isn't so keen to join, which is understandable, because if you're smart about your F1 career, you probably want to delay the Red Bull offer, because you know that if you do go to Red Bull and it doesn't work out, you know, you are going to get eaten up by the Wolves in a way that you wouldn't staying at the B team for a little bit longer. So intrigued to your thoughts on that. There's also a bit of drama between Liam Lawson again. Lawson is, look, I actually think that he gets a bit harshly treated by some of the other drivers, but it has got to be said that he does make enemies, doesn't he, this Liam Lawson guy? So Carlos Sainz, after the crash, said he's just so stupid. Oh my god, this guy, it's always the same guy, he says. And then Lawson actually fired back. So Lawson said this after the race, and he didn't, like, roast Sainz exactly, but he did say, I think he was overtaking me today and he got a penalty. So, you know, he can make all the comments he likes. So, pretty much, as far as Lawson is concerned, it was Sainz's fault. He was on the outside trying to overtake. Lawson squeezed him and they made contact and, you know, Sainz had no right to be there, so it was his fault. And look, if the regulations say that, I think the regulations are just stupid. In my opinion, it should have been a racing incident. But Lawson went on to say, I wish he would come and talk to me about it first rather than telling anybody else. So clearly he's frustrated that on the radio, Sainz was like, oh, this guy is such a clown. Can't believe he'd do it again. If it was my fault, I would have got a penalty, which implies that he clearly thinks it was Sainz's fault for the incident. I've been on the receiving end of it. So just thought it was kind of spicy. Lawson will always fire back. That's what I like about this guy. He will never live down a comment, and he's decided to fire back again. He's not making many friends, I will say, in the paddock, but he is. I mean, look, what did Lawson say when he first came into the sport? He was like, I'm not here to make friends, I'm here to win, or whatever, right? So probably about the time to do some winning, but let's talk about Monza. Alex Dunn is going to be back in a McLaren. He replaced Lando, right, back in Austria. Now he's going to replace Piastri. So we'll see, right? Does this mean Piastri's going to allow less practice and Lando's going to win? Is this McLaren playing the game to give Lando the chance? I doubt it. I very much doubt it. It's common to put rookies in the car in Monza because it's difficult to slam it into the wall too badly. Kimi managed it, of course, last year. So, you know, presumably he's not going to do that again. But on Ferrari's side, it's their home Grand Prix. They've not won a race this season. They want this to be the one to finally win it. As we know, Ferrari seem to design their car for Monza, and then they hope that it works everywhere else. And this weekend, they've got something special planned in addition. They've also got a new head of aerodynamic development. This was actually a tweet from August last year. But according to the article from Auto Racer, this is now a thing that Frank Sanchez, who used to work at many teams, is going to join Ferrari and be their new head of aerodynamic development. That's reporting into Diego Tondi and reporting into Loic Serra, who are really the top guys over there. But they do have a new guy, basically, one of Fred Vasseur's boys, that's come along for the ride as well. It seems Ferrari are also going to drop some like special blue thing this weekend, maybe a blue livery or something. They got these pictures cooked up. Look, I know that they do like to throw this blue thing in there sometimes. Maybe it's just going to be more HP blue on the car. We'll see what Ferrari cook up there, but they have liked to mess around with that over the last couple of years. The reality is the car going to be fast or not? This is a Monza spec rear wing. This is what they used last year in 2024, and it's very similar to the one they used the year before that as well. But they actually have apparently a special version of this that they're bringing this weekend. I don't know if any other teams, maybe other teams will bring a special Monza rear wing, but are we shocked Ferrari have spent some of their valuable development time and resources for next year's car on making sure they've got a brand spanking new Monza rear wing? This is what they do, but they've got this one, effectively the one they used last year, and they've got a more extreme version. So guys, feel free to check out the entire article. I'll leave a link in the description below, but just a quick snippet here from what Auto Racer has to say. They have brought in an unprecedented manner, which is, it's not that unprecedented, this is what Ferrari do, but given the circumstances, it feels... It's Ferrari things, isn't it? It's Ferrari things. They're playing the extreme card. They should arrive with the same spec as 2024, but they will have a second version, which will feature an even more trimmed configuration, the result of technical work that was in some respects risky. Their more extreme solution has already reduced the chord and angle of attack. So basically, it's going to be no wing at all. There's going to be no downforce on this thing. The trimmed rear wing is not the first choice, but it's the extra weapon for maximum efficiency on the straight. So they've designed a rear wing that they might not even use, but you never know, right? You never know. It might be the one to go for. The challenge, they say, was to make it compliant with the checks, because presumably it's so thin and the way that it's structured is so, let's say, designed that it's conforming to the flexibility tests, which are now a thing, as we know, was an issue. The challenge for the trimmed version of the rear wing was respecting the structural complaints and regulatory limits on deflection, which are required on all of the wings, and obviously must comply also with the tests that have been tightened. The operation was not simple. The technicians had to find a compromise between aero efficiency and structural integrity, with the validation of the solution arriving a little close to the introduction timeframe. So basically, it's only just been, like, approved, right? They just got this done in time, which shows But they've put quite a lot into this, right? This isn't just an idea they cooked up at the start of the season. They were like, all right, we'll make a Monza rear wing. It doesn't seem that way. It seems they've cooked up this Monza rear wing that they might not even use, but it's exceptionally low downforce, and they will try it, presumably during practice, and it's designed in such a way that it does comply, but they just got it approved in time. So, look, this is what they do in front of the home crowds. It's going to give them a go, I think, and their car should do better around here. I don't think there's any doubt that it should suit Monza, which is basically like a stop-and-go track, right? You're either going or you're in a chicane, pretty much. It should suit their car better. Leclerc won around here last year. Ferrari are going to give it their all, aren't they? Unfortunately for Hamilton, he's not going to be in prime position with the grid place penalty, so, probably is going to require for Hamilton to make some serious progress, some safety car intervention or something in that kind of order, but because overtaking's just so difficult around here, but look, who knows? You slap on an incredibly low downforce rear wing, Leclerc takes P1 and can't be stopped, right? The guy's just too fast to be overtaken. I don't know. Intrigued to your thoughts on that in the comments. Unlikely to see rain, which means it's more likely that the wing does get used. They will probably try it. But yeah, this is what Ferrari do for the Monza Grand Prix. So very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.